Welcome everyone to another Sales Hacker webinar. My name is Scott Barker, Head of Sales and Partnerships at Sales Hacker. Super pumped for this one. The topic today is how to recruit, assess, coach Jedi sales talent. So how you find and keep those A-plus players. And I'm really excited and honestly humbled to be chatting with our guest today. But before I make the introductions, just a few housekeeping matters. So number one, we will be recording this. So if you need to jump off, want to share it with a colleague, totally fine. We'll be sending this to you after via email, so all good. This one will be a presentation style. So I'll be jumping in with some clarifying questions and that, but as you may or may not know, we do love these to be interactive. So please hop on the little question box and ask relevant questions throughout. You can even hop on right now. Let us know your name, title, where you're from. We might do a few little shout outs here. But without further ado, I am joined by Troy Cantor from the Miller Heiman Group. Troy, welcome. Troy, you may be on mute there. Oh, there we go.
Looking forward to it.
Likewise, we're incredibly lucky to have you. So I always like to add a little bit more color for our audience, for the people that are attending, especially since you've had a truly amazing background. So a few key things that we talked about that jumped out to me. So you're the co-founder of Human Resource Innovations, one of the original platform companies that formed Connexa. You were the president and COO of Connexa, and you saw it from the startup all the way to IPO in 2005, coming off a 40 million revenue year to a 400 million run rate in 2012, which then it was acquired to IBM for 1.4 billion, and that's with a B. You also served as the CEO of the holding company that was the largest sales training company in the world, with brands included Miller Heiman, Spin Selling, Achieve Global, and Forum. You serve on numerous boards of fast growth software companies, and through Connexa and Miller Heiman have studied and analyzed hundreds of high performing sales forces, which again is crazy. And you have personally also run sales forces in size from startup to over 1,000 reps globally. So very impressive. And a lot of our audience today is probably striving to have a career like yours. So very excited to pick your brain today, Troy. And I think we're having a little bit of audio.
It just makes me sound old though.
there might be a little bit of delay with the audio.
Yeah, am I coming through now?
Yeah, let's see.
Hello?
There just seems to be a bit of a delay. Test. All right, these are live webinars, everyone, so these things happen.
Right, is it coming? Am I coming through now, Scott?
Yes, I think we're good.
Okay.
Perfect. All right, live webinars, these things happen. All right, so the topic is, again, how to recruit, assess, and coach Jedi sales talent. So we've got a ton of juicy slides to run through them. I got to see them before, so super excited. But Troy, please do the honors and kick us off. Let's do it. We don't need to talk about me, Scott Barker. Who cares? Let's get to the meat and potatoes here.
Great. Well, thanks for that, Scott. Before we dive in, let's start with a question for everyone that's tuning in this morning. And I think this is a really important thesis. It's kind of the thesis of this presentation, but I also think that it is a huge differentiator between extremely high performing sales organizations and those that are not. And it is, does the CSO, does the chief sales officer, the chief revenue officer, do you own the talent strategy? Are you responsible for designing a comprehensive approach for how do we hire the absolute very best people, all the way through onboarding, all the way through coaching, training, and development, and through the ongoing success of the organization. That is such a differentiator in the performance of sales forces versus those that can say yes to that, versus those who defer all of those critically important decisions to the HR department or to the training department. And I like to use the analogy that CEOs, CFOs have a comprehensive capital strategy. That companies can't grow and go forward without a comprehensive capital strategy. They own it, they're responsible for it. Yet it's absolutely amazing the difference between outstanding performance and lack thereof when it comes to building really effective sales forces is the quality of the people. And yet so many chief revenue officers that I work with across the world don't own that. They partner with their HR team, or the HR team owns it, or the training department owns it. And so I guess before we start, I just, depending on which side of that equation you're on, if you are a chief revenue officer that owns this will give you a chance to kind of benchmark what you're doing versus some other best practices in the industry. If you don't own it, I think this is a great opportunity for you to get some ideas and to put this on your to-do list, because it's so critically important to the future success of your organization and your career. Let's go through kind of how we're going to cover this today. Let's kind of bucket it in. There's such significant change that's occurring in selling and huge change on how people are buying in B2B selling. And we've just come off a really comprehensive study, twofold. One that we've looked at, we've done a really exhaustive research study on what buyers in, again, complex B2B situations are expecting from sellers. And then we've also looked at, the talent strategies that exists in organizations around the world. And so kind of a data-driven approach today. From that data, we'll cover what are 3 really significant issues that are currently occurring in the world of selling as it relates to talent strategies and what the real big opportunity is here. And then we're going to outline, it's kind of an 8-step approach of what a really next generation talent strategy looks like. And then if all those things are interesting to you and you want to do some follow-up on all of the data that we've collected from these recent studies and all the benchmarking on the thousands of organizations we work with around the world, you'll have a chance to get access to some of that research that we'll be publishing that here next week. So let's jump. I'm sorry, go ahead, Scott.
No, I just said fantastic. I'm excited. I'm going to be taking notes as we have this conversation.
Great. So again, I talked about that comprehensive study, and this, we've all seen the stories about the world of selling is changing and evolving, and what digitization has done to selling. It's actually even more dramatic than what we're reading. So if you look at the right-hand side of this, so this again is that comprehensive study, global study of mid-market organizations, 250 in revenue up to global 500. And what we looked at is those that are engaging in major complex purchase decisions. And we looked at, where do they go? What do they use to inform purchase decisions? And it really wasn't that long ago. If you look down the left-hand side, we'll start on the left-hand side. You see salespeople are almost dead last. They're on the top 10. There's some things that fall below it, but they've dropped all the way down to 10. And it wasn't that long ago that salespeople were number one, that was the number one source for complex purchase decisions. If you look over to the right, what we tried to do was break it down in terms of, from the buyer's perspective, what is it that they really count on salespeople to do? And again, the acceleration of this change it's one of the most scary things that I've seen since I've been, in the field of commerce here. 30% clarify needs down the right-hand side to identify solutions. So what that says, you flip that, 50% of the people that are responsible for complex purchase decisions, before they've even engaged a salesperson, they've already advanced to evaluating solutions. They aren't even engaging salespeople. They have other means now at which, before they'll even engage in the sales cycle, over half of them have come up with different ways to analyze their problems, to settle on what the problems really are, and to identify what the potential solutions are. It's absolutely scary in the world of selling how the shift is going to change the way in which we have to engage our customers, and more importantly, how this shift in buyer behavior and buyer priorities, how that dramatically shifts how we think about who belongs in our sales organization. How do we hire this next generation of sellers? How do we train this next generation of sellers? And how do we coach this next generation of sellers? And I know, Scott, you had some thoughts and ideas on this. Why don't I pause and catch up on some of the things you were thinking about?
Yeah, well, this slide is just incredibly interesting to me for a few reasons. When we look at the left side here, and we have the number one choice, for buyers' preferred resource to solve problems is now subject matter experts from industry or third parties. Now, this is something that, at Sales Hacker, really our business and our community is built around this idea. And I wanted to just get your opinion on this, Troy. Is why do you think people are looking more than ever to these, quote unquote, thought leaders or, third parties?
Well, I think, again, there are so many sources at which buyers can do research. What they're really looking for is perspective. And that's really the next generation of selling. It's how do we help our clients gain perspective, gain insight, create discoveries for them. And right now, there's structural lag in how people are running their sales forces. It hasn't caught up to what the buyers want. And so given that lag, that structural lag that exists, I think these third-party consultancies and subject matter experts have filled that void. So again, when buyers, they're looking for insight, they're looking for discovery, they're looking to be taught, they're going to these third-party vendors to realize that. So I think that, if you look at also in your industry, Scott, the growth in your industry has just been, really significant over the last decade. And I really think it's because of the structural lag that exists in most sales organizations' human capital strategies. It just hasn't been able to keep up with the buyer's expectations.
That's an excellent point. Yeah, makes total sense. So essentially, organizations, are not being able to keep up with the pace of, process change and structure change that we're seeing in business. So the individual has to go to other resources to stay, ahead of the game or at the top.
Yeah, and it's even, as someone who's grown up in selling and spent my career thinking about selling and managing sales forces and organizations, it's like this data is incredibly frustrating to think that there are buyers and prospects out there that would rather engage with a website than engage with a seller. I mean, it's such an incredible wake-up call for us in our industry. Definitely. So building on that,
I agree.
We did some purchase intention research, and again, there's some natural flaws with purchase intention. When you ask someone what they're going to buy and how they're going to buy it, they don't always necessarily know. And so we've accounted for that and come up with some interesting research techniques to really get to the bottom of this. And what's fascinating to me is, you start on the left, the product sales. It wasn't that long ago that nothing was purchased until a salesperson could actually show up and help people understand the features and functionality and benefits of the product. As we've talked about, the digital revolution is, kind of eliminated that need. And right now it feels like a lot of organizations are stuck with a lot of the heads of sales that I'm visiting with. They're in this solution sales set where they're trying to help their sales force adopt and grow and learn, where they're actually doing discovery and putting together, bespoke solutions for their customers so that it's a combination of technology and product and education so that they can deliver the best sale for the best solution for the customer. But yet there's this next step that's occurring where the intelligence and sophistication of the buyer, the expectations now have just leapfrogged so far ahead of that it really now becomes the next generation of, I really expect, table stakes now are being a perfect 10 out of 10 on solution sales. and that being perfect at solution sales then enables the next generation, which is to deliver significant insight, discovery, and perspective to your customers. So on the right-hand side there, when we're studying buyers, again, there's some people in this that have been published lately that have talked about, well, it's the death of solution sales or the death of selling. And what's so fascinating is that, steps 1, 2, and 3, that is solution selling, that you've got to get that done. Those are almost the table stakes. But the next generation of this, will your buyers say, that sales call was so good, I would have paid for that. I learned something from working with that salesperson. That when the conversation shifts and the relationship shifts to where the buyer is saying, or the prospect is saying, just meeting with that person and talking with that person makes me better, makes my company better. And that is, again, the next generation. Yet so few organizations have a human capital strategy to keep up with that. In our research, again, this is, 20%, only 20% of the companies around the world believe that they have a talent strategy and the people in place within their sales organization to be successful in the future. 1 out of 5, only 1 out of 5 chief revenue officers will say, I believe in my approach, I believe in my sales force for the future. Yet, when asked as a follow-up, okay, what are you doing? What are you putting in place from a talent strategy perspective to make that change happen? No one has it. It's the craziest head in the sand thing that I've ever seen in my career. That organizations have these comprehensive tech strategies, comprehensive marketing strategies, product strategies, yet there's no comprehensive talent strategy.
And why do you think that is? Why do that, like you said, this head in the sand approach, when companies typically, be proactive as possible? Why is this something that people aren't tackling head on?
Well, I think it goes back to even some of the opening comments that we had, Scott, that it is the accountability of it isn't sitting in one place. That the accountability for this has to sit with the chief revenue officer, where he or she then gets support and help and guidance from the HR department, the recruiting department, the learning department. But there has to be a really clear delineation on who owns it. And then I think the second big reason is that companies haven't done a very good job of measuring human capital initiatives. So if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. And so right now, so many decisions that are made about who do we hire and how do we train them, and if we do coach them, how do we do it? It's really based on kind of opinion and who's the most persuasive person sitting in the conference room when the topic comes up, because there is just such a void of data around it. But again, I think, all the, the pressure that organizations are under now, I think it's starting to bubble to the forefront about we really have to take a more comprehensive look here.
Definitely. So it's about accountability, and two, it's accountability, and two, making sure you have processes in place to actually measure the human capital as well. Excellent. Like it.
Those are the accelerators of it. And the opportunity of it, and again, I know people have probably seen this number before. We've actually got the data that validates it, that your outliers, that top 10% of your sales force, the performance and value creation of that small group just so outweighs everything else that anyone else is doing within the organization. It's just unbelievable. Yet so few companies even know what explains that variance in performance. And then you move over to the far right with the complexity of selling and with some of the labor shortage issues, the extension of the productivity curves. The productivity curve, it wasn't that long ago, from hire to full deployment was 6 months. That's doubled. We're almost, we're running over a year now from the time that it takes to, once an opening occurs, to recruit, to onboard, and get them fully productive is running over a year in most complex B2B sales organizations. So it's the opportunity cost is enormous, and the actual business expense of it is becoming more and more significant every year.
Mm-hmm.
And we just get it so wrong. And this is, again, just a simple explanation, but I've worked with thousands of organizations around the world. And it's just fascinating to me that when you talk about, okay, when you look at when they're going out to do their recruiting, and the standard criteria for complex B2B selling is there's an expectation on education. And a lot of people are even moving to where they even want specific STEM degrees, or they want to see someone with an MBA. And kind of minimum standards is we won't look at anyone unless they've got 2 to 5 years selling experience. Or we want to put a minimum standard of they have to have had 2 years of industry experience. So they've got all of what I would call silly factors that they really think are leading indicators of success, but when you actually study it, they have no impact on success. And then when I switch the question, I listen to them talk about all of these criteria that they put in place before they'll let someone in the door. And then I say, okay, well then let's talk about your very best people. Let's talk about that 10% that are, continually outproducing everyone else. Tell me about them. They never talk about their industry experience. They never talk about their formal education background. They instantly jump to the factors that really tend to predict. They talk about grit and determination and the energy and persuasiveness that they bring. And those great ones, they talk about their presence and their ability to consult with customers and be perceived as a trusted advisor. It's just like no one else we have. But yet, again, nowhere in that list when they're describing the best are these, what I call kind of glare factors that get in the way of making us smarter. And this is, I think this is really important one here because we've studied, tens of thousands of salespeople and studied the absolute very best and the average performers and the poor performers, and then linked all of those attributes back to actual business outcomes to validate it. And there are really 4 factors. There's a motivation and striving. There's ambition, confidence, persistence. There's an execution and doing, which is really about focus, persuasion, responsibility, discipline. And then in the top right-hand corner there, you can see there are these relationship capacities and interaction capacities about networker, individualizer, advisor, and team. Before I go to the yellow one, which is really, these are the next generation attributes that have to be innate inside the people that you're hiring. On the left-hand side there, those have been true for the last 30 to 40 years. That motivation and execution, to be really successful, you have to do those things. Then on the top right, those relating skills, we're seeing an evolution in those. So like that networker, that used to be, can you make a play? Is it your network is so strong that you can make the touch points, get the introductions? It used to be more of a prospecting kind of trait. Well, now what that shift to with the complexities that exist in the world of selling today, it's an ability to connect the dots inside these large, complex organizations. And so we're seeing evolutions of talent where that networker, individualizer, advisor, team, that side of the equation is really about navigating the complexities of the organization and navigating the amount of influencers that exists to get to a purchase decision. So you're really seeing an evolution there. In the next generation, those that are, again, outperforming everyone in the world is this thinking and cognition attribute. And it really is about the adaptability, some natural analytical capabilities, the resourcefulness of the seller, and this concept that is just so important and is going to become, it's going to become so much more important out into the future. And that's this concept of learning agility. And as I work with CEOs around the world, what I also find fascinating under this thinking section here that we're talking about, this adaptability, analytical resourcefulness, this learning agility, that's also what CEOs are using to describe what they're looking for in almost all of their other key job families, whether it's their customer service roles, their implementation roles, their engineering roles, their management and leadership roles. So if you think we're experiencing kind of a talent shortage now, it's going to become so much worse because everyone is focusing in on that bottom right area, and there's just not enough of it in the world. When you understand
Right.
that,
I love,
go
yeah, I
ahead,
love
Scott.
this slide. Sorry. Yeah, sorry to cut you off. I saw this slide and I just loved it. I've kind of just in a personal experience throughout my career, definitely looked to hire folks that were adaptable or had this almost like an entrepreneurial mindset to them. And I think that really fits the bill with, the lower right corner that we just saw. And it's nice to see it all kind of backed up by facts. I thought that was super interesting. And Troy, I had to flip it back to you. So which on that whole spectrum there, what do you see as the three most important traits? If you were hiring a big team right now, what those three would you look for over everything
Well,
else?
I'm gonna I'm gonna cheat on that a little bit, Scott, because I'm gonna say on the left-hand side of that those are table stakes, that those are given, that you have to show up
Right.
motivated, hungry, focused, and serious about doing work. But on the right-hand side, where
Yeah.
you're seeing this just acceleration um, in the change in what buyers need and expect, that learning agility is absolutely categorically number one. There's just such a difference in performance between salespeople who show up intellectually engaged and curious about the craft, about the company,
Yeah.
about what they represent, and then even more
Hmm.
importantly, just doing deep dives into their customers' business, because without all of that knowledge, you can't move to the pinnacle of prospective selling. You just can't teach customers the things they need to learn to make a purchase decision. The
Yeah.
next one would jump up to the top, which is networker and individualizer. Again, the complexities now of selling into B2B, where there are so many influencers, so many more influencers than there used to be. There's
Hmm.
really an art and a skill to being able to connect the dots and get all 8 to 12 influencers on a purchase decision on the same
Yeah.
page. And so those are the attributes that I see, here in the last few years, that are just that there's just such a variance in performance between the people that have those and the people that don't. Yet we know this and can document this. And our data shows that it's only 30 some percent of sales forces around the world are trying to measure even a subset of these. And of the 30
Yeah.
plus percent that are even trying, only half of those even do it on a standardized, consistent basis. There's enormous opportunity here. And I'm
Hmm.
going to go back. This next one is about a personal case study, that when you know how to measure those things, it's amazing how much you can go fish in different ponds to find talent, that you don't have to go look within your industry or look for experienced sellers if you actually know how to measure the existence or non-existence of those attributes. So this is a company that I used to be the president and CEO of, Connexa. Excuse me. And Scott had mentioned in his introduction, we took that company public in 2007, coming off a $40 million revenue year. Within 7 years as a public company, we had that to a 400 million run rate. That's, we were one of the original software as a service companies to go public. That was an incredible run. And it was a great learning experience. We had over 100 PhDs on staff, so we were studying and analyzing everything. And when we knew how to measure those things, I listed here the backgrounds of the top 10 sellers through that run of unbelievable value creation. And again, we're selling complex software as a service solutions into some of the biggest companies in the world. And we were only running 20% all in sales and marketing costs. A lot of our competitors were running 50+%. So the expectations here were enormous. But yet, look at our top 10 sellers. This looks like no sales force that you would see in the tech space. Our top salesperson over that run, before he joined us, ran a big box retail store. The second actually was out selling, competing for periodical space where the magazines would go in the displays at Walmart. Another sold dental insurance. Another was a wine distributor. There were only 2 of our top 10 that actually came from the industry. So again, I just think this is just such a classic case study, that this was some of the most cost-effective growth that existed during that period of time. And yet, because we knew how to measure, we could flip the model on its head and expand our pool and go fish in different ponds to find talent that none of our competitors were even looking at. And I just think this is just such a classic example that when you get it right, it gives you so many more ways at which you can execute and outsell the competition. So how do you get to that?
I love this case study. Anyway, go. Yeah, sorry to interrupt.
No, sorry, Scott. No, and so how do you get there? And this is it. I mean, it's a research-based approach, and so few companies have done this. But when you do it, and this doesn't cost a lot, you just got to get focused. It really is on the right-hand side here. You know, you've got that kind of brain logo there. And what are all of the factors that explain success? So you've got to study it. So if you take your sales force and you say, okay, who are the ones we want more like? Who are the ones that are going to get us to the future? Who's that top 10? Who's that top 20%? Let's go through and study it. Let's analyze it. What are all the attributes, the skills, the most salient training and learning experiences they've had? What are the professional experiences they've had? What was the formal education experiences they had? What kind of coaching and feedback have they received? Like, just capture that and study that. Compare and contrast that to a group of people who haven't had the same amount of success, and figure out, what are all of the differences, and then you do the data modeling against everything that you're measuring. So again, I say there's just such a lack of measurement in human capital, but yet in sales, most people at a minimum are measuring percent of quota. A lot of other organizations are measuring average margin size on each deal. They've got some cross-sell metrics. They've got sales cycle times. They've got customer engagement, customer sat statistics, upsell, renewal, percent of win rates. So we want to take all of those factors that can influence success, model them against the key outputs, and all of a sudden you've got a validated model that can influence every single decision that you make. And you can make it with confidence because you know the existence of these attributes, the existence of these skills, and how they're trained and coached dramatically influences performance. Now all of a sudden you have a data-driven approach to influence every single human capital management decision that you make, and you can do it with confidence because now all of a sudden you have data to actually do a return on invested capital analysis. No one in the space of HR is doing that. And it's all there. It's all sitting right there. And this gives you a chance to take this to an entire next generation.
Very interesting.
And once you have it, again, like I was saying, it then influences everything that you do from a human capital perspective. It then gives you, again, like the Connects example, more ponds to fish in. When you're fishing in those ponds of people who don't have traditional sales background, you can pick up the existence or non-existence of what exists. You can then, person by person, build a training and performance improvement plan based on their unique needs. It dramatically shrinks time on the onboarding. It gives you a guide to how you coach them. And again, it's an individualized playbook for all of the training. And this is the checklist. And I'll go through this checklist and then I'll pause for some questions and some interaction.
Mm-hmm.
But score your company on this. Do these 8 things, these 8 business processes exist in your company? And again, I've studied this countless number of times. Those that have all 8 are going to outsell anyone they're competing against that don't have all 8. A lot of companies have 1 to 2 to 3. In some even more advanced industries, they're only up to 4 or 5. But if you can do all 8, it is some of the most cost-effective growth that you're going to get inside your organization. So again, step 1, we got to start with that study that I laid out. Can you actually document and verify the differences between your outliers, that top to 10 to 20%? What's different about them? What's different about what the innate that they bring to the table? What's different about the skills they possess? What's different about their learning agility? What's different about how they've been trained and coached? Get that documented. Step 1. Step two, once you have confidence in your ability to measure that, all of a sudden you don't have to just recruit within your industry or recruit people that, come from 2 to 3 years of sales experience. You can now go out and expand, so that this is such an important stat. Are you hiring the best 1 out of 3 or the best 1 out of 5 candidates, which is fairly typical, and that leads to mediocre sales performance? If you can say, I've analyzed and looked at 25 candidates to make one decision, the people that do that, their average per person selling numbers are so much higher than the person who selects 1 from 5. So you have to have the tools on the sourcing side that enable you to evaluate 25, 35. I've worked with some organizations that even go as high as 50, that they require 50 people to be looked at and screened. And those are qualified people to be looked at and screened before they make an offer. Now that sounds incredibly arduous, but yet what that means to the long-term performance of that organization is no one in their industry can even touch them. And it's because they have this comprehensive approach to how they hire and onboard. Third one, that once you have those things, that you now have a measurement-based approach to how you select them. That now that you know what explains success, you're outsourcing in more ponds, now you can measure the existence or non-existence of the attributes and skills that you're looking for. And that can be done through structured interviews, assessment centers, tests, a lot of the things that we help organizations build. The next step that's so critically important is a systematic approach to onboarding. And there's this, again, I think this is so important to get incorporated into onboarding, and we call it a performance contract. That, you get excited about hiring someone, they're excited about joining your organization. Before that contract is signed, you need a performance contract with them that you outline. These are the expectations of the job. This is the amount of prospecting. This is the amount of activity that we're going to expect from you every week, and we're going to measure it. This is the amount of learning that we expect from you. These are all of the areas of knowledge and skill that you're going to have to acquire within the next 30, 60, 90 days. And you're signing up for that before you join. And here's what we're signing up for, our commitment to help you shrink time on accomplishing that. So again, a guarantee from the sales organization to the candidate, and from the candidate to the sales organization. Here's what we're going to learn in the next 90 days to shrink time on me getting productive. That's a real critical one as it relates to organizational performance. The next one, down to the bottom left, is a coaching process. Do you have a systematic coaching process in place where it is a weekly one-on-one? Your sales managers, if they're responsible for 7, 10, sometimes 15 to 1, they owe each rep at a minimum 30 minutes one-on-one time, specifically reviewing all of the knowledge, skills, and abilities and the past week's activities. And again, if it's getting measured, it's getting influenced. And there's something about the performance of sales forces where each rep is given each week of one-on-one feedback time, so that organizations have a systematic way of doing that. And then the sales leader's job is, after that weekly one-on-one, all week long is deal strategy and teaching and coaching. But every Monday, they owe each individual 30 minutes. It's a huge differentiator in performance. The next one that's, again, really differentiates people that are outperforming everyone else in their industry is the skills development. That once we know what the skills are that tend to lead to success, do you have the measurement in place so that you're measuring the existence and acquisition of those skills? That a lot of companies throw a ton of money at training, but yet they're not continually measuring their salespeople's aptitude and how that's actually getting applied in the day-to-day work. Again, we keep talking about this concept. If you can't measure it, you can't manage it. Yet very few organizations are measuring their sales rep skills. So important to a comprehensive talent strategy. The next one, which is, again, is really next generation, you think of succession planning, where sales is kind of an up or out, that you become a really effective seller and then you become a sales leader. Well, there's so many of these next generation sellers that don't necessarily even want to be a sales leader. And so I think it's so important that as you build more and more spots for these really high performing, high flying salespeople, that you create flexibility in them having a long-term career in selling. And by flexibility, I mean, give them bigger titles, but still let them have their quota. Give them bigger territories. Again, your very best people, all of them need to have a career plan that they feel great about. And it's amazing how many people will actually stay in selling if they can pick up a bigger title, pick up a little bit bigger base, pick up bigger and bigger territories. And again, so I think that's just so important for companies to rethink that. A lot of organizations have sort of, again, what I call kind of silly policies in place about how they pay and how they title their salespeople. But when you get a lot of really high performing people, you've got to have more flexibility. And then the last one, and it almost sounds kind of cruel, is you have to have a deliberate offboarding program. That if you go back to that weekly coaching, if all of these things are in place, that you have weekly coaching and you have ongoing measurement of the acquisition of the skills and how that's getting applied, and you've got ongoing measurement about their contribution, it's amazing. They will self-select out. That all of a sudden what takes someone 2 years to figure out that someone's not going to make the cut, and then it takes them another 6 months to get up the courage to get rid of them, that's enormous opportunity costs. Whereas if you have a comprehensive talent strategy like we have in place, sometimes you'll sort this out within 6 months. Typically, this won't take over a year for the sales leader and the individual rep to both know before it's time to have the conversation that that person doesn't belong here, that they should be offboarded and found a place where they can actually be more successful. So again, we've covered a lot of stuff here, but these 8 operational factors, if these are in place, you will always outsell anyone that you're competing against that doesn't have them. So I'll pause for a second and get thoughts and questions, Scott.
Yeah, so much insight in there, and it's great because our audience has some clarifying questions or actually wants to dive deeper on some of these things. So I think it's a great time to do so. Okay, so we have Katie Kinnaman. Thank you so much for your comment and question. So Katie is really interested in seeing an example of a performance contract, and was wondering if you could just dive deeper. I know you mentioned a few things, but what should you actually include on a performance contract?
Sure. So I'll use an example of a client of mine. I'm really proud of this organization. It's called Phenom People. It's a high flying early stage tech company that has gotten critical mass really quickly. It's one of those organizations that's done the magic double in size every year for 3 years. They've got pretty significant scale now. And their CEO, he's got this. He has the checklist in place. And it is amazing that when you've got someone and you're bringing them on board, it is, you outline. So at his company, he knows that these are the top 4 selling skills that are kind of selling competency-based skills that differentiate average performance from high performance. These are the 12 product knowledge, industry knowledge, technology knowledge, components that you have to become exceptionally, what's the word I'm looking for? Competent in. And so you lay that out at the very beginning. So to sell at excellence here's what you have to pick up from a selling competency and skill perspective. And this is all the industry and product knowledge components that you have to possess within the next 90 days. And while you're learning that, we also expect X amount of prospecting. We expect X number of demos completed. We expect X number of RFPs completed. So you lay out what the activities are that you're expecting over the next 90 days, and that's measured weekly. So before I join that organization, I know in advance this is what I'm signing up for, and we're going to measure it, we're going to track it, and both sides are accountable to ensure that this happens. And what this company's selling is an amazingly complex product, but yet because of this kind of a talent strategy approach, In that high flying tech space, a really critical measure that everyone looks at in the venture capital space is your CAC, your customer acquisition costs. This company's running 50% of the selling costs of the other organizations that have done this 3 years, double every year in a row. So you think about what that means to his organization to have half the selling costs of the other high flying tech companies, because and it really is, again, they have an amazing product and amazing leadership team, but they have such an effective sales strategy in place, talent strategy in place.
That's great. Yeah, thanks for that, Katie. I hope that that answered your question. That was a great breakdown there. Yeah, if you're open, Troy, I got a couple more here. So Brian, thanks for your question. Wants to know, so how well do these stats and this kind of approach transfer into maybe a smaller, less complex sales org? Should we still be looking at something this complex, or is this just for, big, robust sales organization?
No, thanks for the question, Brian, and it's a great question. Again, like the example of the Phenom people that I just used, I mean, that's, again, they're at scale now, but that's not a giant global sales force.
Yeah.
What I would argue is that if you need salespeople, you need a talent strategy. You need to validate and put in measures that explain success. Because what I'm seeing, and again, from that data that I was showing you about how buyers are starting to transact and buy, if your sellers are not adding enormous value to the process and creating discovery and teaching the prospect and engaging the prospect at an entirely different level, it'll go away. You won't need a sales department anymore because your customers will just self-select. They'll transact electronically. It'll go away. So I think it applies. If to get your product in the hands of your customer requires high-end selling, no matter what size it is, you have to have a talent strategy in place. If you don't have a talent strategy, you better hope your product and that your margins can sustain prospects and customers just self-serving, buying completely digitally.
Yeah, would definitely agree there. And then, okay, so we have another great question from Anna Davis. We have so many. Sure, we've definitely hit on a topic here that needs to be discussed, because I don't think I've ever seen as many questions as we're getting right now. So I want to do a few more before we kind of go on. But so Anna Davis, this is coming from an individual contributor. So it sounds like, so how soon do you reward high performers? Anna is crushing quota in only 6 months, and she's afraid there's no path forward for her for at least another 12 months. Is this normal?
So send me your contact information, Anna. I've got a job for you.
I love it. I love it.
No. Again, if you have a talent strategy in place, like I've laid out here on the checklist, Anna should be getting weekly feedback. Everyone in the organ, everyone that sits in the executive committee should know Anna's name. With a measurement-based talent strategy, there should be no doubt about who's creating value at the organization. And how do you get more people like Anna, shrink the number of sellers that you have more high-quality, high-end people that are crushing quota and creating enormous value with your customers, and pay them a hell of a lot more, and then weed out those that aren't making contributions. You get fewer people getting paid more, creating more value for a fraction of the cost of what you're doing with having a bunch of mediocre people in place.
Yeah, love it. Awesome. All right, so let me know, Troy, do we want to keep going? You want more questions? How you feeling?
I'm good. I'm really good.
Okay, awesome. So this, again, a great relevant question from Shoking Zhu. Thank you for your question. So this goes back to your selecting the best from 1 in 25. And Shoking says, if we're using a recruitment firm, should I still look for 25 candidates or less because they've screened and probably had to pay for that screening process?
Well, I think that, again, companies that put in a comprehensive talent approach here in that second box that's still up on
Yeah,
the screen here, recruiting firms should just be one source of applicant flow. That all of a sudden, you know, having a couple people inside your organization, and they don't have to be very high paid people, but that are just working the networks, you know, fishing in ponds that you're not currently fishing in to expand that applicant pool. Like one good example, there's a head of sales that I was working with another, again, exceptionally exciting tech company that's just growing like crazy. And by figuring out this talent strategy and understanding this, that the pinnacle of selling is about teaching and perspective, he's shifting to where he's sourcing teachers, that they've come up with ways at which they're out picking out teachers that are looking to change and engage and apply that craft in a commercial setting. So again, that's just one example. So I think you've got to, as an organization, don't rely exclusively on recruiting firms. I mean, you've got to deploy multiple ways at which you're just filling the top of that funnel of candidates.
great point. That's so interesting. Going after teachers, I love that. That's a great approach. All right, so we've got some more, but let's move on, Troy, and we'll kind of bake them in as we go.
So, you know, if you want to spend some more time on this, you know, please drop us an email. My colleague here, Mark Grimshaw at millerheimangroup.com. You know, if you're thinking about developing a talent strategy, you want some follow-up questions, you know, I'd be happy to engage with you offline. You want someone to take a look at your current talent strategy, kick around ideas. You just want to learn more, shoot us a note. We'll be happy to follow up with you. And like I also talked about some of that buyer study and that talent study, that will be going to print here in the next couple of weeks. And so if you're interested in seeing some of that data, we'd be happy to get that out to you as well. So don't hesitate to reach out.
Awesome. And just a quick note, if you can go back to that slide quick, Troy. So this, to request the copy of the research paper, this is actually the wrong email. So actually go to info@millerheimangroup.com. So info@millerheimn group.com. And that's where you can request a copy of the research paper. And Troy, we have 7 more minutes, so I am not letting off the hook just yet because, like I said, we have a million questions. So let's dive into a few more if you're good with it.
Yeah, no, happy to.
Perfect. Okay. This is a great one. Where is it? Okay. I really like this question. So this is from Shane G. My question is, what is it about the recruiting process, specifically the interview process, that allows you to uncover this interaction and cognition attributes that a candidate possesses?
Yeah. So, you know, the benefit that we've had is that we've just studied this over years and years and years and looked at so much data on this, and actually then looked at the responses to these questions. How does it actually predict or not predict the existence of these attributes? And so there are structured interviewing questions that we've created that, you know, we can teach your people how to use, or there are also tests that can be used that do a really good job of sorting some of that stuff out, that have situational judgment attributes in them. But just as a freebie to throw just a few of those out, I mean, there's some really good questions that as you're talking to someone, ask him about, what are you the most proud of? Why are you the most proud of it? Tell me about a situation where you were way over your head, and just pause and let him answer, and ask him, how did you respond to that? And then what did you do after that? Talk about, you know, tell me about a time where you felt you weren't prepared. And it's interesting, you just pause and you let them talk. It's amazing what someone will tell you about, and again, great learners, it's almost counterintuitive. They find ways to get themselves in over their heads because they're exploring and they're pushing. And then without even aiding them, they'll come back and talk to you about, once I got in over my head, this is what I did to ensure that it would never happen again. Talk to them about, what's the last book that you read? What was your favorite book of all time and why? You get insights into it. What did you take away from that book? And even if it wasn't a business book, what from that book have you applied in selling? And what you're looking for is people that actually are processing, that they're continually learning, that no matter what situation that they're exposed to, whether it's professional, whether it's personal, whether it's, watching Netflix or going to or taking a class online, they're applying it back to their craft, because every interaction in life is a learning experience. And those people that possess that natural learning agility are constantly processing of every experience that they're encountering in life. How does that apply to what it is I'm trying to work on or build in my career or help my customers understand? So there are just series of ways in which you set that up that can really get at the nuances of folks that possess that or don't possess that.
Very, very great points. I love that. I think that learning is so important in everything, life and business. All right, so let's go to another question. So we've got Sean Culleton, who seems like from a sales management perspective, and he seems to agree with everything, the talent strategy and each seller is looking for. He's wondering, how do you transition from your current sales talent, which maybe you're only looking for the first three quadrants that we talked about, to a group that has the skills that we talked about that are in the lower right section there, this cognition and learning agility?
Yep.
Can it be trained?
There's no, great question. It's a question that we get a lot. I think, if you've built a sales force, there is evolution or revolution. So revolution is I'm willing to blow it up, that I'm going to accelerate the amount of new talent that comes in, and I'm going to accelerate the number of people I'm offboarding. Some companies are a little uneasy to make that drastic of an approach. Then there's the evolution as opposed to the revolution, which is you've got to dig in and you've got to start, when I've got my box up here, you've got to start with the coaching process, that you've got to outline, okay, this from a knowledge and skills perspective, these are the absolutes to be able to do your job. And you've got to be able to provide the backup resources and make the individual seller accountable for the acquisition of that knowledge and that skill. And your sales manager's there weekly following up, coaching, teaching, working on those things. But it's just you put in an ongoing system at which you're measuring, are these individual sellers acquiring these skills and developing these skills? And if not, you're coaching them out of the organization. If they are, you keep giving them more and more and more, and you'll start to see their performance, move up into the top right-hand box.
Yeah.
But I wish there was a magic answer to make people smarter.
Yeah, that'd be nice, eh? I think there's apps that claim to do that, but I don't think we're there yet. Okay, so again, the screening 1 in 25 or selecting 1 in 25 shocked a lot of people in our community. So we've got another question evolving around that. Do you think, and this is from Owen, thank you so much for your question. Do you think that you risk losing top candidates during the recruitment process if you screen, upwards of 25 candidates or more? Because that has to lengthen the process.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. But you've, as organizations, we've got to build systems that allow us to do this efficiently and effectively. It's, none of this stuff that we've laid out is, a lot of this stuff is easy to say, but hard to do. It takes rigor and it takes discipline and it takes commitment. But these are the things that if you put the rigor and commitment in place and you put the business process in place to make it more efficient, the payoffs on the back end are just absolutely enormous. So the risk as you're getting your sea legs on this, of letting a couple good people get out the door, I don't think outweigh what the long-term returns are when you get this right. So as I was advising, I would take that risk. I would take that short-term risk for the long-term gain.
Makes sense. Awesome. Well, Troy, that is our time. I wish we could keep you all day, but I know you're a busy man, so I have to thank you again for all the insights today. Truly, I don't think I've seen this level of engagement from the community yet in one of these that I moderated. So sorry if we didn't get to your questions. Definitely send them to info@millerheimangroup.com. And also, I would strongly suggest checking out all the research that they've done. But Troy, thanks again so much.
No, really appreciate it, Scott. And maybe down the road we can come back and just do a Q&A session. So thanks thanks for everything you've done. Really appreciate it. And thanks to everyone who took the time to listen in today.
Perfect. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day, Sales Hacker community. Take care.